month of September or at the end of September or something like that.
I wouldn't go any past our meeting. I mean, if you don't know by then, we're not gonna have enough people, then I'd say that would be the deadline. That would be my choice, my opinion.
You might put out an email to the other clubs too, if they have it, we're gonna cancel if we don't get it out here now by September date.
Well, both the other clubs know that we're having it, right?
Yes.
Right.
I know,
Yeah.
I don't know about
You might not know,
CIW.
if some people are on the fence, you might not know when you may cancel.
I don't know about CIW, but I know, Tom Zier down at Lincoln Land, he's put out emails about it.
Don Dixon at CIW knows about it. I've sent him a couple of messages.
CIW knows about it. We talked about it at the board meeting a couple of weeks ago. Trying to get some demonstrators.
So maybe
Get
people,
demonstrators to demonstrate at the meetings. You know,
Might be
from our own
me,
people.
Paul, and Lindell.
you know,
So,
We can't even get people to go. That's,
Yeah, that's the other thing too, is we got 6 people signed up right now. And another thing too about it is if you do a demonstration, the whole thing's gonna be free for you. We're not gonna charge, we're gonna waive that fee for the day. So if you wanna do a demonstration for a half hour, whatever it is, an hour,
Hour and 20 minutes.
hour and 20 minutes, then the rest of the demonstrations, you're there, and meals and all that good stuff.
Bob, would you like to do something on segmenting?
I've been kicking around the idea of doing, 1 or 2 demonstrations.
All right.
The problem is, I'd have to have a TV set there because I'm gonna show a video. And I didn't know if I could do that or not.
We should be able to. I was figuring this one will migrate its way over there, and I've got other TVs I could bring. So
Okay.
we can split these cameras up. We got 3 cameras. We can
Yeah.
split them up. Plus we can ask the other clubs if they can bring their audio video. At least the cameras and microphones or whatever. I don't know about microphones because if we blow it up in a small room, I think everybody's here seen that back area of CW or C Wood Shop. It's not going to be the biggest of areas,
Right.
but we've done it before, and I know Brian's got dividers and things like that. I don't think he's got the divider walls. I know he's got cloth dividers he can put down.
Right.
Well, anyway, the videos are made by the guy that designed it,
Mhm.
and that's what I learned from. So if that's okay, I'm thinking about doing that.
Yeah, we could.
Sign you up.
Bob Smith, that'd be segmenting needs TV, right?
Bob Smith?
Bob who?
Bob Smith.
Yeah,
Bob Smith,
yeah,
yeah.
Bob Smith.
get him too.
Yeah, get both of them. Get Red Smith too.
Yeah. But all you need is a TV, Bob? Okay.
Yeah, can I still hook my laptop up to
Yeah.
it?
Okay. Segment.
Yeah, we'll have cables and everything, HDMI cables.
Paul Willie will be doing a peppermill. Jerry Rhodes will be doing something or several.
You know, if you really get real short, I might be able to do something else too.
All right.
We'll have to see how many we can get.
As I say,
Heck, we just might have it for our club members.
well, as I say,
Well, that's what I was gonna say.
everything's canceling, we've been talking about things we wanna do or should do, we haven't done anything. Even like you just said, even if it's just us, and get as many of the other 2 clubs as you can, I'd say just go ahead and do it, as long as it's not gonna cost us a lot. I don't know what he's charging, is he charging
He
anything?
doesn't want a dime.
Okay, that's
I
great.
mean, I will still recommend us
Yeah,
that we
we still keep pushing.
donate
try to
something
get
for his time.
whoever we can, yeah.
But when I asked him what the cost would be of doing all that, he's like, this is free. So you can't beat that, but I would still like to give him something for his
Free's
time.
the best price. Yeah, we ought to offer him something, but what would that be?
Or they have to buy something.
A gift card to see Wood Shop?
Chili Rush.
Chili Rush, yes,
Yeah. Right.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah. stopped over there and talked to Brian for a little bit before he came over here to this place to do his demonstration, so he knows where it's at. He's familiar with the store and Brian. So, there's nothing. But the only other thing is, here's what the schedule will look like. This is what, 2019?
2019.
And you can kind of see the first session is
8:45.
Lindell.
8:45.
So that was, yeah, about 2 hours.
Yeah. Hour and 3 minutes.
Well, the first one was 2 hours, at least you had on there.
2 hours.
Yeah.
We gave a look.
8:45, 10:45.
Yeah.
I guess it was.
And then, you have the other ones that are all an hour and 20 minutes each. So I don't know if he would be wanting to do a shorter abbreviated one for Mark, or if he'd want the whole 2 hours like Lindell got.
Oh, I don't mind that.
So I don't know.
Well, I thought we'd have Lindell only for the first one.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be the normal thing.
And
But if we did, we'll go out.
if Mark had more time for
I don't know, I don't remember the demo.
Yeah.
either way he wanted to do.
I mean, Lindell, he did all day, so I don't know if he's gonna do that same all day again.
Yeah, I can check with him.
He was all day?
On this one he was,
Okay.
so he did all 4 sessions.
All right.
So I don't know if he's gonna do that again, or if we need to have another 9 turners demonstrating.
How many total sessions will we have this year? Are we gonna be like here, 3, 3, 3, 3? Or we have only room for 2, 2, 2, 2?
We should have room for 3 lathes.
Okay, 3, 3, 3, 3 then.
One might possibly be a mini, which
Sure,
happens most of the time.
So we got 12 demonstrations.
Well, and one question I have, even if we have smaller numbers, let's say we had 20 people, do we want to split 20 people to 3 demonstrations, or for 20 people, is that enough to just be at one demonstration, so we can just have 4 total demonstrators, or, less demonstrators per person, that way it's not like, okay, we got 3 demonstrators, each is demonstrating to 2 people in practice.
Yeah.
I would say cut it down to two options the last 3 settings.
Yeah.
Because Corey's string steady rest, I would think most people would want to see that compared to making something from a pin blank, and not, take away from the pin blank, but the steady rest is going to be a lot more interesting, I would think, than.
Yeah, and this isn't the
Right.
schedule for this year.
Right,
but this,
right. But I'm just
yeah, I see
saying,
what you're saying.
Out of the 3, how many people would choose option 2?
I remember I was at the string steady one, so.
Yeah, I was too, and I'd do it again. But that's just my
We could
opinion.
just have Lindell.
I think I was stuck at the string steady because I was a camera guy.
Hey, John?
Yeah.
So, in one of my show and tells today is an elliptical mallet. That's about the level I'm at for demonstrating where I would feel comfortable, the elliptical mallet. Is that something that someone would, what are we looking for in these demos? I'm looking at, I'm a low level turner, so that's something I can do that I feel comfortable with a mallet type
Yeah.
thing.
I've never seen an elliptical mallet before.
I would set through it.
Okay.
If you don't,
If you misbehave.
That would make the thing hoopy. So we have an elliptical head.
yeah, especially one like this. I mean, this is a nice one. The texture and everything on it. I hate to use that one. Yeah, so that's one thing we have to figure out. I mean, do we want to keep with the format like this previous years, or par it down to just 2 stations and split out the floor and make it bigger?
I like the idea of 2 stations, so you get more people at each station, and then we're not,
I mean, it also depends too if we start getting more people signed up by the time September rolls around.
Yeah, if you find
We
out
could
there's
open
gonna
up-
be 50 or 60 people there, then.
Yeah, we can open up a
look for
third.
the 3rd session.
Yeah, but it's gonna be hard to predict if you got a lot of people
took out this column here, we'd have just those two there, so Lindell doesn't wanna go all day, so yeah, you're right, 6, sorry, I counted just these two. So if Lindell doesn't wanna do all day, then we'd have at least 6 more people.
I think technically, if you wanted and you didn't have enough demonstrators, you could just do the same 2 at different hours, and then you just go to the other one the next hour.
Yeah, the flip-flop, you know.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Because then you could see everything that's happening.
There you go.
Yeah.
Did the demo
If you're
fly?
short, I can't be there, so I don't know.
I'll do a better job on my second demo.
I'm getting married the week after, so.
Wow, this is pretty good.
That's the week after you get married, this is before.
Yeah, I'm assuming there will be something happening that day that I will have to be dealing with.
You trying to invite us to your bachelor party?
No, that's not
He doesn't want us there.
Hey, you know what? You know what? You can get your bachelor party all signed up for this.
Yeah.
Bring them all here.
None of them would turn, so.
I mean, we'd have a different kind of stripper, but it'd be just taking the bark off wood.
Yeah.
Oh.
I should have just said I couldn't be there.
It's not too late to back out, Chris, that's all I can say.
Remember when you
The
get that,
turning day or the wedding?
Speaking from someone that's been married twice.
options get limited.
Facts, it does.
Alright, so 4 minutes. So we'll just do 2 stations. And possible third. And we'll see what the count is by September, and if we have a lot of people, then we'll make it 3 stations. And maybe even if we go 3 stations, we could have people swapping around too with turners. So I think we got firework going on. So any other thoughts on that? The other thing too is, let me switch over to it. I've been working on the website and getting it up there. So right now, I've got the tab on there for turning Saturday with the registration form you can click on. So if you don't pick up one tonight and turn it in, you can always go there and download it and print it out at home, or email it to Crowbar, myself, or Jerry. And then it has what right now is what Jerry sent to me for prices. I just got my email and Jerry's email on there right now for contact information. And I almost hate to see 70 people crammed into the back of CU Wood Shop, but we could probably do it.
I think that's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right now, we don't have that.
Yeah. So the other part of there is I've got demonstrators on there too. So that's the other one too, is for our club. We'll still need a couple of November and December demonstrators coming up. Aside from the point of turning Saturday demonstrators, we need those first.
I might be able to do I told Scott a year ago I would demonstrate a bowl and a bowl.
Bowl and a bowl?
Yeah, and I'm having trouble getting the right piece of wood to do it, a couple pieces, so I think I finally found something that's getting dry enough that I could probably, it's got to be completely cured before I can
Good.
work on you, but
Take a couple years.
November or December.
Yeah.
But I'll know here next month probably if that's,
All right.
if we'll be there. I've got some wood left to shred. I've got people that make.
Let's see, September demonstrator, I mean, Steve, I was hoping he'd be here tonight to find out what he's going to do in September. I'll have to email him and find out. And October I'll be up for doing hollowed pumpkins. So let's see, what are the notes from last month that I have? got the old TV stand that we had before this, and I don't know if that could be used for it or not.
Yeah, the wood one.
Yeah.
Really?
Not use the base.
Is it here?
No, it's in my garage at home in my wood shop. It's the reason why we don't have it anymore is because one of the wheels wore out the bottom and it just broke it in. It was getting ready to collapse in on itself, and
Yeah, but
it just needs a new bottom put on it.
like the library.
It is still attached, but.
if we do proceed with the train Saturday, we'll need a set up and tear down team basically. Um, Brian said one of the things he wants to have help out is clear out that back area. I don't know if anybody's ever peeked back there to see all the stuff that's back there when they're over there shopping. But there is a lot of, he's got some lathes and other material and stored items there that he said can be moved off into the other part of that CU wood shop, because it's all just a big warehouse on the other far end there. But we will need a team to get in there probably beginning of that week or week before. And I can coordinate that with Brian and see when he wants to start working on that. It shouldn't take more than an afternoon to get that cleared out.
I'd be available most days, I think.
Yeah, me
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Right. So I'll send out a email to everybody and let everybody know that hey, we got this coming. Unless we want to do a sign up and sheet format or something like that, but I think if I just send out a call to everyone and email call and say, hey, we're going to do it this day.
Might be a lunch involved afterwards.
Maybe.
Buy your own lunch.
We get the guy with the credit card there.
Let's do it.
Lunch break.
So probably one of the things we'll need is 2 or 3 days before is a bunch of groups going there to help Brian clear out that area. And then the Friday before turning Saturday, we'll probably need some help getting everything set up. Getting the equipment out of here over to there, and then reversing, we'll need to bring it back. We don't have to worry about chairs, tables, or anything. Brian will have all of that. So that's one good thing. We don't have to worry about borrowing from this club. We do use their tables and their chairs, which we're fortunate to let us do. So basically we'll need to get a way to get the TV, gang boxes, we'll have to break down the lathe and take it over there, which is not hard to do. We've done that before. Like we've even, whose house was that? It was off of Windsor, I think it was.
Steve's,
Oh.
during COVID.
No, we went to Steve's during COVID, but it was a different gentleman we had another turning Saturday and we needed to use a lathe, and Dave something, wasn't it?
What?
The guy, one guy's house, we had.
I think of it every time I go down Florida Avenue.
Yeah, we had to he's got a weird garage. His driveway the road driveway goes right past the house, and he takes a sharp 90 and it goes right into his garage. And I somehow managed to get my trailer back in there and turn through that 90. But yeah, we can do a trailer with a lathe on it if someone doesn't want to break it down. So I think this one, you take about 4 bolts out and they'll pop right loose.
That's what slide the motor off.
Yeah, just slide everything off, and I mean that's what I did when I got the same lathe and when I went over to Mike's house to get it. And I can also throw my lathe in the truck too, and we can use that for another big lathe if we want to go with 2 big lathes. And Mike said, "What are you giving the frown for, Mike?"
I'm gonna tear that thing apart and drag it over here.
I tore it over part of your house and drug it home and put it together. I mean, it ain't that hard. I just got to back my truck up to it and drop the tailgate, and I can slide the whole main body right off. Pretty much how I got it into my shop. Slid the main body off, attached one leg, slid it back far enough, got the other leg attached.
Those 2x4s in that shed leg ain't that heavy, you just lift one each end,
Yeah.
both feet.
Okay, anything else? Yeah, Chris?
I've moved up to Bloomington, and I know that Central Illinois
bringing in all the wood tonight. There's a lot of wood for this month. Must have had a lot of trees come down, huh? We'll go ahead and start show and tell. Wasn't any challenge or anything like this month. Next month, I'm thinking probably the challenge we'll have is based on what Corey ends up doing with his chains and captured rings tonight. So, and I'd like to see also something, maybe do a little chains and captured rings with a little bit of holiday flair into it, something of the fall. So speaking of which, let me turn this one. So here's what I got tonight. I'll be coming up in October. We'll be doing a little pumpkin turning. So it's basically just a hollowed out vessel out of basswood. And he looks a little beat up because I tried to do a little pyro work to him. Didn't go quite right. Huh?
With a candle up inside?
Yep, you can put a candle up inside, he'll light up too. I don't know if this will show any light in there or not. A little bit, not much. Flashlight. Switch the flashlight, darn it. I wish it'd turn on that way. Yeah.
Scares me.
So I'm going to be doing on this guy I'll be doing a little bit of hand carving, and then I've been trying to do a little power carving on it too, of using saber tooth bits, and I've got a Arbor Tech carver too. So I'll show all three of those. And if you get in a pinch, you can throw it at somebody that's sleeping over there. So, this will be October's demonstration.
Right.
Good? What?
Ted Barley. I had a couple of peach trees, and a month or so ago, I had a limb break off of one. Next month, another one broke off, bigger, it was about 4 inches in diameter. So I cut it and made some molds. It wasn't another ring higher, but the wood was brittle. Part was kind of like it was rotten, but the trees were 5 or 6 years old. So I got 2 of them out of it. Polyurethane.
Dwight?
Dwight Crane again. I got one almost exactly like that.
Is that right?
You all have probably seen this before,
Just before that other art show.
but I brought this tonight because I brought a bunch of elm, and this just shows you how you can dress elm up. If you add a little color and a little liming wax, it brings out all the figure of elm. Elm's kind of boring all by itself, but if you dress it up, it looks really nice.
I'm Tom Little. I'm visiting. The Decatur contingent brings me over. I haven't joined the club yet. Time to do so. I'm brand new. I just got my first lathe maybe 2 months ago. So I made these 3 bowls, real small. And then I made this ice cream scoop. And then John helped me turn this pen this last weekend. There we go.
What kind of lathe did you get?
Rikon, a MIDI.
Okay.
There you go.
Oh, thank you.
Doug Bowling from Urbana. My cousin brought me a maple burl that looked solid, but when I got into it, it was infested with ants. A lot of times that's how you get burls, is because of the ants. And when I started out, this was going to be the bottom, and this was going to be the top. But it was so bad on the inside
So I decided, well, I'll just tip it over and make a bowl that way. So came out kind of unique. Now, this was a burl that was kind of 2 lobes, so this is the other lobe. Again, the same thing. I had to turn it upside down, and a little bit of filler in right there. That's where the ants went in and out of the thing. But both of these will be going back to my cousins for bringing it to me. It was a challenge. I don't know if when you're coring one of these or cutting them out, you'll get catches because of the way that wood grows. And when I say you get a catch, a big piece comes out. I mean, it's just, it catches and there comes this great big piece out of there. But fortunately, it was not enough coming out that I could still finish it up. So it was a challenge, but a couple of nice pieces that I'm sure they'll be happy with. Thank you.
Sam Forrest from Mount Zion, and I made this tool handle. Nothing special about it other than the orange streak that's in the wood. I believe it's just a piece of maple, but it had an orange streak going through it, and I believe Doug's had a bowl like that before. And it's had a couple of nails. I got this off of a pallet, so I bought a new Rikon bowl gouge and needing a handle for it, and that bowl gouge was sharp, I'll tell you. But I don't have blood on the wood, so I passed that. And then a wig stand, just to remind everybody that October is our wig stand month again. So I hope everybody takes a few hours and turns a couple of wig stands. Crowbar's up almost 540 by now, so. 528, so we all have a goal to attend. Maybe cumulative, we could get there. Thank you.
Good reminder. Thank you, Sam.
Pardon me?
Good reminder for October. Thank you.
Bob Griffin from Decatur. I got inspired by all the smoke last meeting. I don't know who that was. But anyway,
Well, police are still looking for him, I think.
Yeah. I fired up the torch and I started working on this piece. And I'm not real happy with it because things happen. And I tried, so it's not my favorite, but it is a bowl. And I also tried milliput. And I'm not a fan of that either. But I tried it, so that's what happened. Poly finish. That helped seal the burn parts too, so that was better.
John Crackler from Decatur. Made a couple of items this past month. We did a little multicolored striped bowl, Purple Heart, a bunch of things in there. A lid, and then we finally figured out what we wanted to do with it and got it done. The finish on all 3 of these is the Old Masters gel polyurethane. Really does a nice job. This is a little turning and carving. This is sycamore and walnut. Have a little nightlight in the inside of it, and so that turned out rather well. And then I did a 2 bowls in one. Turned out to be a nice piece of walnut. When I started this, it was a pretty junky piece of log that was laying out there, but it really turned out to be a nice piece of walnut. Interesting technique for doing this. You have to turn this portion of it pretty much as a sphere, pretty much as a round sphere. You turn it first, the conventional way, leaving a double thickness on the wall, and then you make a jam chuck that you could put this in and caulk it. And then hot melt glue. First one I did, I just hot melt glued it like the video I saw, and it's a bear to get that hot melt glue off of there. When I did this one, I wrapped it with masking tape, and then hot melt glued it, and that made life a lot easier to do. But it is an interesting technique to turn the two bowls in one, and one of them is canted. Maple lid, and on the lid I used water-based polyurethane as the first couple of coats, and then I put a top coat of the Old Masters polyurethane gel on it.
Paul Woolley here. Small cherry that drill for a 1 inch glass vial. Haven't put a finish on this. All my finishes are usually Danish oil. Thinking I might do something different with this one, I'm not sure, so it's been sitting there for about a month, and one of these days I'll figure out if I want to do something different and go back to my Danish oil. No finish on yet, but I think when I get some oil on it, it's going to pop really pretty.
Alright, Cody Jones of Urbana. So I'll start off with a piece that nothing on the lathe, but this was carved, it's out of wood, and we'll be talking about some of this kind of stuff in the demo later. So this is basswood, all one piece of wood, and all of those chain links fit inside of that box originally. So we'll be talking about a little bit of that, but we'll also be talking about a lot of things on the lathe. So this is one more piece of wood here, and the different rings rotate and spin. So that was all done on the lathe, minus the little carbon there, so you can see inside a little bit. And then the two more pieces that I've got, this is a little pencil holder, but these two rims also spin. So just something nifty, a little bit more than a proof of concept, but it's still always a proof of concept. And then last thing that I'll talk about here briefly is instead of a captive ring on a goblet, it is the captive goblet in itself. So the top piece of it is separate, all one piece. So similar kind of concept as, you know, the carving, but you're carving it on the lathe. So we'll be talking about that kind of stuff if you stick around for the demo later on. So that's what we got.
Last time I had fluorescent orange socks. If you gotta wear compression socks, make it worthwhile.
Yeah, they really show up on TV too.
I bet they do.
How bright them things are.
Anyway, I didn't do the original turning on any of the pieces I got tonight. I bought them out of the tailgate out here. They was all out around and what have you. So I had a little fun playing. Little ball here. This one wound up pretty darn thin. And that's wax on the outside. A little bit of filler with some metallic in it. And metallic come through here where the hole was. And then I've got something shiny inside, and I can't remember what I got. And this is my first try at something painted or done. I don't know about the color scheme. I got told that wasn't very good. But anyway, I got a bunch of fine metal flake in there just to see what happened. I'm pretty new yet. I'm experimenting to see what happens. Anyway, that's where we're at.
I'm Chris from Mount Bloomington, West Champaign. I have a sellable I made a good while ago, but pretty ambrosia running through it. And then I can't remember if I brought this in the more of that set. And then I have one that I sold but I want to show that is here.
Oh, nice. The scalp one?
Yeah, I don't recall if I brought it here, but it was based off of when I think it was Scott who did the three-cornered with the curves.
Yeah.
I was like, I could CNC something like that, and this is what came of that idea eventually. So, but it was scalloped. I wish I still had it, but somebody bought it for like $90.
No, get out, wait before he hits me. Scott from Warrensburg. Just working on some Marvelous Monday mallets. Made it on a Monday, so I thought I'd come up with that crazy title. A little bit bigger than the mallet I currently have in my shop, but I'm hoping to do some post carvings this winter, and I wanted something a little heavier to give the chisel a little bit more oomph. So I made that one, did a little burning on it, a little texture there. And then I do like offset stuff, still reading Barbara Dill's book there. And so this is an elliptical mallet, and I've never made one of those before, and I think it'll be pretty practical, but just once again, it's challenging myself with getting it even with the even cut on both sides to get that beautiful seam. And so did just a little bit of ring burning for the burning thing, but my two Marvelous mallets, made of maple, no finish. Maple, no finish.
Hello, I'm Terry Rhodes. Got a cosmic cloud vase. Dyed tamarind, spalted tamarind fountain pen, Junior Gent 2. Back tops. Occasionally before I work on something on the spindle turning, I'll turn some couple of tops or something just to kind of get the tools. And a little Christmas tree. If somebody likes, at an upcoming meeting, I can show how I turn my tops, and at the same time maybe do a Christmas tree similar to this.
Seems like a great December demo.
Pardon?
Seems like a great December demo.
December or November, whatever. December sounds good.
One of those is
Whichever one Paul doesn't do.
Pardon?
Whichever one Paul doesn't do.
December. I'll do December. I had people ask me where I get my burls, and I tell them I get it from a burl tree. They don't exactly believe me, but also, don't shy. Spin the burl with it. Oh, you're the winner.
Was that before they made bottles?
Back before bottles.
Yeah. You're here to spin the bottles as a kid. Jerry had to spin the tree.
Well, we're talking about the burl and that. I just want to tell everybody I saw a large piece of burl at the Sea Wood Shop today, just before I drove over here. It's more than 2 feet in diameter. Wow.
We've seen that.
You have? Okay, you know about it then. Just wanted to,
I've seen that.
I don't know how long it's been there, but
Long time. I saw it in the
Really?
spring, yeah.
do you know what
Yeah, and
piece it is? Do you know what
he wants
piece it is?
way too much money for it.
Yeah, I figured. But do you know what wood it is?
No, I don't. Sorry.
Mike?
No.
No? Anybody else have anything? All right. All right, we'll go ahead and do a drawing then. Put it off this table over here for the wood, and I'll throw a craft supplies card on here too. So it's $10. It's good to 2026. So $10 off. All right. Oh, Bob, right off the bat. There goes that car.
First time I ever get to experience that.
Place to store stuff, so
All right, next one up.
probably not even good either. Well, you should try it.
792.
There you go.
Probably means the same.
Yeah, we got a lot of wood up here. I don't know who brought in what. Yep. There's an hackberry, some walnuts, elm.
Hackberry.
Was it?
Hackberry.
Hackberry. 799.
Couple hours.
I don't need them. Two pieces, you get two pieces.
Hold it up. Show everybody.
Pick it up, you gotta take it.
Mix both of them individually. Smush them together.
Glue it up.
See the mix.
The problem with moving is I don't have a place to keep it anymore.
793.
In your car? I already have stuff still at the garage in the place I used to live. But I have to clear out soon. So if anybody wants wood, I have a collection of a couple big walnut logs.
Maybe if you put something on your
Some
finger.
were sealed, some
Nothing
I got
beats
on
the
Saturday.
I had a vision. All right, 789.
Crop it.
Yep.
I saw a couple videos.
I'm not even playing with Gary. All right. 797. Looks like they're just Hollywood Tower. For the Allen? All right. 790.
You draw another one.
What's that? Draw another one?
That's why I always want to take it off.
Yeah, you don't want to take it on. 795. Hackberry walnuts. Not sure what that one is.
What'd you get?
796.
Come in, Andy.
It's the same thing as kind of those, like, it's got a divot all around the chuck, so it's just a collar, big, lock it, lock to the truck and lock it to a smith grinder. So it's just for, I think it should be, yeah, where you, well, I haven't had it yet, but I think it's okay. Because I wanted a big, like, how big it's. What do they call it? Safety valve? Yeah. And I think that it's only for, other guys have set screws, or there's other ways of moving it so it doesn't spin off. Mine, in general, is just big enough that they're just like, oh yeah, nothing will spin off, these people are doing stuff. I guess, or something, but fine. I want to get it bigger, and like the reverse turning on a bigger thing, you know, that's the torque being mine, so I would rather not have it.
Safety first.
Well, yeah, I'm getting better at that.
Yes, yes, yes. And he got the front pile after Mark Baker passed away. He was the editor, and maybe still is, of Woodturner magazine. That's in the UK. Yeah.
I was on the east side of
Just move on your bill.
And I saw him doing this for a while.
Yeah.
Gotta start somewhere. Yeah, got pretty stuck out there.
Yep.
hard to learn it.
Because that one's just gonna be up front.
Yeah, this one's looking towards the whole area.
That should be good. I mean, if you see anything where it's like,
Well, I was gonna have it so we have it aimed towards you. If you want to show something,
okay.
hold it right here.
Would there be people in that club if
Yeah,
not you?
yeah. You set it up. I'll just be standing here.
I'll show you what I have.
Okay.
Bring it over here.
Might be somebody else. Might be somebody else. It's got room.
I think that's 5 or something.
Well, that way, if you want to show.
Oh, that's right.
It's not like a
Yes.
and so it would be as late as I'm not planning to buy a large until I have a place. My house is large.
The process without showing you.
I don't even know if that'll fit on my leg.
Hardwoods are a bit stubborn. Unless you got like some, saber tooth birds or something like that.
Yeah.
Closer, easier than coming
I'll let you look city is closing.
Ghoulish thing and then
I've made a bunch of, done like a Frankenstein one, I had a werewolf.
yeah.
I have ones that look all kind of goofy and funky faces. Real funky.
Right.
You can learn. got the tickets? Let me get me a ticket.
Lucky one. Can't guarantee that.
When does Judy go back to her?
I see how you Thursday. Yeah.
She started doing wells last night. One Thursday, steam pump.
All right, last call for tickets.
They're gonna program it, so that she has to control that she can give us a boost.
Everybody got the tickets?
That's Thursday.
All right.
Now it's not working.
Well, it's working, but she
Let's
said
go ahead and do this and draw on here.
maybe not. Maybe it's from certified.
All right. First number on your white ticket. 553. 553. Mike? It's Reed. You need big ones, Mike. All right. Well, he's picking. Next number 543. Here comes Sam.
I won those here and I decided on the one.
All right. 554. Jeez.
I want them to stay over there.
You need a chunk of help. We got some, edging. Here. Here, trim. Here. Why, we didn't want it, why we bring it in?
I haven't used it for a long time.
All right, well, he's picking 557. Well, he's looking there. 541. 541.
Is that you, John?
541. There you got it.
That's a whole box, Gary. Gary.
Take the whole box.
Take the whole box.
Take the whole dang box. Take the whole box, Gary. Take them all.
You can use it for all of those ornaments too.
All right.
You'll find those.
545. 545. Yeah, I wonder what someone would see that.
Oh, I would have told you there.
548. 548.
Can't remember.
Who's got number 548?
Oh. Can you use those together or one of them? Yeah.
All right. 549. 540. 540.
It'll be a little cut into it.
More greenish going, greenish yellow.
By the time it's darker and darker.
558.
Not mine. Had you for a moment. It was John's lucky ticket.
It's my one and only lucky ticket.
My buddy kept that one.
He's trying to. He put it over with his when I got it. 544.
How did I get an extra one?
Another piece of wood.
544.
Have me a chunk of wood.
$7.
Yeah, get a big piece of elm to stress that Rikon out. That looks like a chunk of wall.
We can cut the corners off for you, Tom.
539. 539.
Add that to your chair.
Here's Larry.
Let's see with Logan's there.
He's got wood left.
You have met Logan.
See, Larry, that's
Alright, we got 3 chunks of elm left and a chunk of hackberry. 549. 549.
That would be John.
John?
I'll take one just so that we get rid of it. Okay?
Move along. 552.
555. Who's got 555? Scott?
Yeah, I was just gifted 555. What are my choices?
2 chunks of elm and a hackberry.
Thank you. Who brought this in?
Test out. Test out.
547. 547.
Yeah, he's looking down in there, you see him.
Somebody wants a chunk, grab it.
Anybody want a chunk of wood?
Yeah.
Raise your hand if you want one. John's giving it away as
Mike's got his elbow up.
Mike Garfinell.
We brought it, we don't wanna take it home.
551. No, Crowbar doesn't want any elm either. Alright, one more, then we'll just call it evening. If you want a chunk of elm, go grab it. 546.
That's back in John again.
Alright, I'll take another one of the elm.
Anybody else want another chunk of elm?
Okay, now,
Take an elm? Alright.
pick one you want.
Anton, you raise your hand back there. Do you want a chunk?
Yeah.
Alright. Anton, one more?
Yep, there it goes. Yep. Everybody, all 3 got one.
That one there is that one left. Alright. Let me get the camera rolling and we'll get started here. Get,
If anybody wants some of this, come and get some. I
alright.
know it's getting a whole box.
It's, what's that?
Different times or all?
It's on mute right now, so just push the big gray button on top. Alright, let me get the cameras going. Yeah, I got them both going. Alright, Cody Jones. Showing how to do some, Walt Disney.
All right,
What,
here we here? Okay, good. So yeah, today we're going to be doing Captivating Creations on Cody Jones. So title here, I know that we had talked about doing chains and stuff, but a lot of this is kind of related to the captive ring, and then hopefully some of this is captivating your imagination and or attention and stuff the whole time. Hopefully show you some new things throughout this. Hopefully some not too intimidating things, some things that you can actually do and try. So, so that's why we've got our Captivating Creations there. So we're going to start with just carving because a lot of this does have some carving components. we're not going to be doing and showing too much of how to do some of this, but to have basics of carving would be helpful. So with carving, if you're carving a bear, all you have to do is just remove everything that's not a bear, and what you have left is a bear. You know, it's that easy, but there are ways of making that a little faster, a little bit safer, a little bit more efficient. So, yeah, so one of the things, safety is important. I mean, we all know that with any of turning or working with power tools or sharp objects, safety is important. So if you are carving with like a knife, just make sure that you're like carving away from you, not carving towards yourself, making sure there's nothing in kind of your, line of fire. That goes with, common sense that you guys know with the lathe. Stop cuts are important for carving, and this will be important, and this does actually have relevance to turning as well, because like if you are, you know that the grain's going in one direction. If you cut with the grain, it'll keep going, it'll come off, right? If you're trying to do, let's say a piece like this, and you're trying to get rid of the stuff in the middle, you don't want to remove the stuff on the edge. Or same thing with like a goblet, the grain is going this way, you don't want to remove the end. So stop cuts are important. So that would just be some sort of cut down there. That way when you're going here, it ends up coming off at a spot rather than taking all of it off. So the way that we use stop cuts for turning would be if you're doing a natural edge bowl and you've got the bark on top and you want to keep that bark on. If you just start in the middle of your hollowing process and pull out, there's a good chance that you're going to chunk off the bark and you're going to have a piece missing. So how do you prevent that? You take a parting tool, you take a thin bowl gouge, whatever, and you like demarcate your line on the edge of that where your rim's going to be, and you dig it in fairly deep. You get past the bark. That way, if you do chunk it out, it stops there. That's the same concept as a stop cut, but used on the lathe. And then lastly, grain direction is important, and we know that for if you're turning, sideways or end grain spindle turning, it's important whether you're going uphill or downhill, but that's also really important for carving as well for kind of the strength. If any of you guys have made furniture, the back of a chair, you're going to go with the grain, that kind of thing. So in the example of carving a bear, if we have this bear down here, obviously it would make more sense to have the grain going long way, whereas if you have the grain going short grain this way, and you're going forward carving like the head, it's more likely to, behead your bear. So you just want to be careful. So just things to keep in mind. We'll kind of talk on some of that a little bit more, but those are just like real quick, simple carving basics if you want to try just carving kind of things. Now, ways of carving. You can just use a pocket knife and you can whittle. That's how I first started, but I know a lot of you guys maybe aren't as excited to be carving with a knife. There's also, chisels and mallets. Scott was talking about that earlier. So that's another way of carving. There's also power carvers and Dremels, that kind of thing. So there's different ways. But really carving is just removing material. So you don't even have to keep it with carving tools. You can use the bandsaw to get rid of material. And for making this chain here, that's a lot of chain links. I used a bandsaw to rough out as much of this as I could. You can use a drill press to remove as much material as you can as well. And I'll show some pictures. I used a drill press for removing a lot here. Sanders, table saws, whatever. Actually, earlier before the meeting, Corey was talking about making didgeridoos. They use termites to hollow out wood. They take a whole stick, and then they use termites to hollow out the inside of the eucalyptus. So that's probably going to be slower and less efficient than we're wanting to do, but it's removing wood. That's functionally carving. So I know a lot of guys are like, oh, you didn't do that entirely on the lathe. It's not turning, and there's arguments that can be had over that. But my thought is, if you're trying to make something, it doesn't really matter how you make it. The end result is the thing that we're looking at, the thing that we see. So with just removing material. Okay, so, and actually I'll mention now, if there are any questions, I'm going to kind of try and go quick just because we're starting a little later and I don't want everyone up too late. So, but if there are questions or, want me to show something in more depth, to re-explain something, shout it out, let me know. Because, that's the whole point of this, is to pass on ideas, thoughts, that kind of thing. So please do. Okay, so I mentioned I started off, before I had ever, heard of a lathe, I had done whittling as a kid, and kind of the first two projects that you do would be like the ball and cage. So, this is a ball and cage, but we have different looking cages. So these are some versions that I had carved recently, and then also chains. Those are kind of the two whittled whimsies is what they're sometimes called, because they're not really functional, kind of whimsical, but they're really fun because you get people coming up like, how did you get the ball inside of the wood? I don't see any glue joints on your chain. How did you do that? Well, you carve them out. But both of those can be done on the lathe, or at least to a degree. And that would be in the captive rings, not captivate rings, but the captive rings, as well as like a cube and a cube. So we'll go through those. So for captive rings, how many of you guys have done these before? Okay, so about half of you guys have tried captive rings before. So real quickly, the way that you would do captive rings, usually it's done while spindle turning, and we'll talk about why that may be better in the future. But you kind of start by just doing two coves on each side of a bead, which is what your ring is going to be. And then you end up just like rounding over the backside more and more and more until you eventually meet up. There are tools that you can use for that, either just a beading tool or they have actual captive ring tools. But you can also do this with, bowl gouges and such as well. Longer, thinner is better, so you can get behind it. But I mean, really, that's all it is. You can see where that ring is going to be on the left. You can see in this picture in the middle that it's been kind of removed behind a little bit. And then finally, it's removed. You can see with it kind of that scar of where it was. Then you would just kind of take your ring to the side, tape it up, sand or turn away the middle, that kind of thing, so that it looks nice and clean. So it's actually not that hard of a thing to do. Kind of interesting, kind of amusing. A lot of times people add that to goblets. And that's why I ended up doing this captive goblet here, just because I thought that would be an amusing kind of twist on the old captive ring on a goblet. But I'll show you kind of the details of that, but it's the same concept. So there's captive rings. Any questions on that? Okay. So then the other version of kind of the ball and cage that we have that you can do on a lathe is a cube and a cube. Now, has anyone done this? This is like the Turner's cube is also what it's called. Okay, and that I kind of figured there would be less people because there is yet less utility to this one. At least with the captive ring, you can put it on a goblet and the goblet's at least semi-functional. Whereas this is, you make it once, it's cool, it's a neat thing, and then, there you go. But I think that it is neat, and I'll try and show some different ways of thinking about it so that if you want to try this, you can. So the basics of how to do this one, ideally you would make your cube just out of a block of wood and measure it separately and cut it. You could do it on a lathe. I mean, if you have a metal lathe, you can make a cube there just by facing off at the same, height every time. So you can do that too, but it's just easier if we've got, access to saws. We can measure and cut a cube. If your cube is small enough and your jaws go around it, you can grab over on one side, you use a Jacob's chuck with a Forstner bit, and then you just drill out one face. If your cube is bigger than that, then you would either have to turn in a recess in there that your expanding chuck can go in, or what you can do is you can use your Forstner bit on the drill press and make that recess. The problem and or I guess solution to that is if you're going to use your Forstner bit and drill press, you're going to make one side of it that you can hold, that you can then put on the lathe so that you can use that same tool, that Forstner bit, with your Jacob's chuck. But now you only have two faces. You still have three other kind of opposing faces that you have to do.
If this were a cube, this is a rectangle. If you're holding it from this side, you drill in from here, now you have a hole. But you still don't have any way of holding these other faces. So what you could do is you use your drill press and you would drill out a hole into this so you can hold it, into this face so you can hold it, and this. But at that point you can just do the whole thing on the drill press, so you don't need the lathe. But that's just kind of, you can think about it there, and then you can then go on to like the next steps of like what else can you do from there. I know that that's quick and maybe not as, I don't have one of those here with me, but do those steps kind of make sense? Like, and when you use your Forstner bit, you're going to be making the inner cube smaller, and each time that you turn it, you're going to be adding another face to it. So eventually you have all flat sides, you have a cube inside. Does that kind of make sense? So, okay, we'll talk more about some variations on these, but I do want to mention here that for this kind of stuff, planning ahead is really important. So you can plan ahead either just like, if you're good at kind of the 3D spatial awareness, you can plan ahead just on the lathe and just what you're going to do in your head, or you can draw it out. I often like, on some of these, I like drawing them out on paper so I know what's going to be saved and not, or even just drawing it out on the lathe. But like this would be a cross-section of just a captive ring. We've got our thin goblet stem there, and then you've got your ring that goes around the outside, and then this is how I drew this piece on the lathe. And so originally the goblet was here on the edge, and that's what I kind of drew out so that I knew where I was going to be turning. You can see over here, this was the start of this piece here, and I drew out all of my chain links on the side. So I had an oval drawn here, I had an oval drawn there, and on the front I had a bunch of ovals. And then this is using the drill press to like remove material that's not needed. And then this one here, this was a proof of concept from a while ago. I haven't gone back to it, but these handles are also loose and they don't come through. They almost come through, which is why I'm not going to do any more on this. If I tidy up these holes, it's probably going to be too big. The handles come out, you lose the effect of it's one piece of wood. So this is where it is. This is a demo piece. But can you guys see that this would have been turned on the lathe? I have the bowl shape underneath here that was turned all the way. I have the bowl shape in the middle that was turned all the way. But in order to do these handles, I had to have walls going straight up and down all the way around and straight underneath. Can you guys picture that in your head? So the cross section for this would have been important to kind of know of, even though I have a bowl shape, which is important, you can't add material back on. So if you want a handle that is going to be taking up this space when you finish it, you have to account for that at the beginning. So you have to keep that, in this case, it was a straight up and down wall. So that's where some of these cross-section and thinking of it in cross-sections can help, because otherwise just kind of like, well, I'll do a bowl and I'll put on the handles later. For these, that doesn't work. You have to plan out your handles before you even start your piece so that you know where they're going to be, how big they're going to be, that kind of thing. So does that kind of make sense there? Okay. So now let's go into some variations. So for the ball and cage, the cube and a cube, I think this one has less stuff, so we're going to start with that one. So one thing that you can do is you can do a cube and a cube and a cube and a cube, right? This one is just starting, or this is just making smaller cubes using smaller Forstner bits, or I mean you can use a square tool, whatever, and you're just making your cubes smaller, digging in deeper each time. This is where if you you can just drill a little recess in there with a Forstner bit so you can grab it from all sides without actually drilling in far enough so that your cube becomes separated. Because if you can imagine, if you drill in deep enough, that's when the sides of your cube get to be small enough that it becomes disattached from the edge. So for doing that, whether you're grabbing it from the outside or the inside, you would start with your smallest Forstner bit, go to the depth, your predetermined depth, go all the way into the middle, and then you can go to your next size Forstner bit, and you wouldn't go as deep. Then you would go to your next size Forstner bit, not go as deep for however many cubes. Keep track of your measurements, because if it's going to be a cube, you need it to be, you know, the same on each side. So keep track of your measurements, whether that's on your quill, you know, at what point do you stop at, that kind of thing. But it's the same exact concept as the cube and a cube. We're just starting with another Forstner bit before we get to the wider one on the outside. Make sense? Okay. And then we also have ball in a ball. So that's the ball and cage, but instead of carving it, we're going to do it on the lathe. And a lot of times it's easier if you start with a sphere. For that, instead of just drilling in, you're going to have to drill in and then kind of get around that corner a little bit so that you meet up with the other holes that you will be drilling or, you know, turning out in the future. And it's probably easiest in a sphere, starting with a sphere, just because you go in a predetermined depth and then you end up having a sphere at the beginning. But really, you don't have to start with any, you know, symmetrical shape. You don't have to start with a cube. You could start with a rectangle. You just know that you would have to, if you're using a Forstner bit, you would have to go in deeper on this side and not go in as deep here, so that you end up with a cube in the middle. Or if you're doing a ball, you can start with any shape. These aren't my pictures. A lot of these pictures are not mine. I'll point out the ones that are, and I didn't have time to like credit. I just found them on Google. But you can see on this shape to the right, we've got some different shapes that are a little bit more, you know, dodecahedron kind of things. We've got a few different layers, a ball and a ball and a ball. There are different variations that you can do of this. So, we got someone over there smoking.
We got a...
I don't smell anything yet, so we're probably good. Is that too loud, or can we keep going? Keep going?
You want to keep going, though, if everyone wants to monitor the switchboard over there.
All right. So those are kind of the main variations on the cube and a cube, ball and cage kind of things. I don't think that there's as many like options or utilitarian-esque things. I don't know if any of the stuff I do is strictly utilitarian, but some of the things are more useful than others. So this first variation on the capture ring I'll talk about was the Saturn Bowl demonstrations that we had with Jason Clark. Now, how many of you guys were here for that? Remember that? Okay, so a lot of you guys, which is good. For those of you that don't, or just as a refresher, what we're doing here is we've got a little bowl inside, and then there are circles outside of that, and those circles are free moving, and that's why we've got the grain going in all sorts of different directions. Like this piece here, we've got the sapwood and the heartwood, the circles are cut, and then you can rotate the ring inside of it. But it is a completely free moving, but stuck inside of it, ring. Say it again?
See, a policeman ought to be here by now.
No, yeah.
That's the alarm or something else.
Yeah.
Somebody probably did.
So the way that he would do this, or I'll go over the steps of this simply. You're going to turn a bowl. You're going to turn a big, wide, flat rim. You can see in this third picture, this is how wide and flat and perfectly straight that rim is. And then you're going to use a thin parting tool. I don't remember what he had, but Crowbar, I think it was one of your tips, was you can use a butter knife and just grind it down, and now you have a thin parting tool, and it's awesome. It also looks kind of like a shiv, so just be careful with it. But like, this works really well as a thin parting tool. And so you're going to use that. You're going to go at the same distance on the top and the bottom of your thin rim, and you're going to go at a 45-degree angle in, and they're going to meet up, and now you've got a loose piece. And I'll kind of show here, well, we don't have that. I'll pass this around. So this has the same concept. We'll talk about it more, but you can see on the middle parts here, that 45, and I used a regular parting tool here, which is why it's looser, but you can see kind of how that would work up and match up. His is just a lot finer scale. So let me pass that around just so you can kind of get a feel for the concept there. Now the one tricky thing with his, or actually like really clever way of doing that, the way that he did it so that you don't have to measure, because like with this square platter, the measurements would be pretty easy. They're all centered, you know, you can find your center, you can measure in, okay, I'm gonna dig in an inch away from the edge. But on this one on the left or the one on the far right, those circles aren't centered. So how are you gonna measure and match up exactly where that line is if you've got, you know, that circle is not on a center? The way he did it is he turned a cylinder that's bigger than his bowl. So just turned a cylinder, cut it off, and made a box, you know, a cylindrical box. He didn't worry about the lid on it because you don't need it to like sit and match up. All you need it is that same diameter of your cylinder on each side. And he made the bowl or the like inside part of the box big enough that the bowl piece will fit in there. And then he used that to kind of jam chuck around his bowl. And now you know exactly where your circle is. So then he can use his thin parting tool and just go in at the edge of that you know, cylindrical box that's like cinching it together. So that's really clever because it's good for measuring so that you know that you're going to meet up. And it also adds a lot of stability because can you imagine if you're holding this piece with like a tenon and you're trying to like use a parting tool to jab in on the edge, like you're gonna have so much flex, it's not gonna work. So that's a really clever way that he went about doing that. So does the Saturn bowl make sense? I mean, you guys have seen it before, a lot of you have. So that's a thing that you should definitely try. Now, after he did that demonstration,
Cody.
yes.
The key doing that is dry wood.
Yes. If you guys didn't hear that, he said the key to that is dry wood. And that is exactly the case. I'll mention that later too. But after he did that demo, he was like, I haven't really played around with other ways. I don't think there's other ways of doing it. And I was thinking, I'm sure you can apply it to other concepts. So that's when I made this plate here. And this plate has, you know, a ring around the outside. Now, you notice that I'm only going a little distance with this ring because it doesn't go because the wood warps. This was wood, I turned this in the winter because I think his demo was in like January. So I turned it in my shop in the winter. When I brought it in the house, it warped enough so that my ring does not go all the way around. So absolutely make sure that you use dry wood, especially if you want it to like spin freely. I mean, you could use wet wood if you want. We can talk about those considerations. But yeah, so now if we take the same concept for this plate, but a little better designed, we've got this piece here. So this I'm calling kind of like captured rims, but really the concept is exactly the same. For this one, I made a bunch of beads, but that's kind of to hide the fact that these two are like free. But you've got your beads, and then all you have to do is go in at a 45-degree angle and cut in. So yeah, we got the fire truck showing up and everything too, I think. Yeah, probably just to turn it off. I mean, again, we don't smell anything. And water. Okay, all right. So we should still be good over here. But yeah, so all we're doing is we're going in at a 45-degree angle there and a 45-degree angle here, and that's for one of them, and we do the same thing there. So the concept is really simple. When you're actually doing it, be careful because it can cause a lot of friction. See, I don't know how to switch the camera angles, but you know which button to push there?
I certainly know. But
push the 1 or the 2, because I think that, yeah, there we go. Okay, try a different one. Can we go to this one here? Okay, so there we go. Can you guys see the black part on the top and bottom of these? So that's friction, and when I was doing this, to minimize the friction, I was going kind of 1, 2, and then I would go 3, 4, and it took a bunch of like bouts of doing that so that I wasn't heating it up too much, because if you do heat it up too much, it can warp and crack. And don't ask how I know that. But this is a separate, unrelated piece, but this is just merely to show kind of that angle. This was for demonstration purposes. I wasn't actually trying to do this well. But yeah, so there's the basics of that. Now, some things to consider when you're doing this. I'm going in at a 45-45 to do this. You don't need to go with that angle. You can change your angle to match your needs. For this, let's go back over to this one here. My one complaint I have with this piece is I've got a really thick wall. If I were to do this again, I wouldn't have as thick of a wall, but I wasn't sure how much wall thickness I would need, and I figured I would err on the side of too thick rather than cutting off the top of it. But once, like thinking about this stuff, and now we can go back to the computer, thinking about this, you can kind of plan ahead and even measure. I didn't do any measurement, I'm just eyeballing it and we're playing around. But the top two triangles here, these red lines are your plunge cuts with your parting tool. And I would use a thin parting tool on these, especially if you want it to be a subtle, line. On the one that I passed around, I used a regular parting tool, which makes it spin a lot easier, but it's a lot more visible. You have a lot more play in there. But these top two triangles are, roughly a 45 degree, and it's the same angle. But one of them is going to make a lot deeper of a score, a lot bigger of a ring. But if we have a really thin wall, that's when you cut off the top of it, right? So you could make a shallower angle here, and then you can get away with a thinner wall thickness without worrying about going in. Considerations for doing this, though, is that, is it still called a kerf if you're using a parting tool to remove material? I think so. So take into account your kerf, thickness. If you're using a regular parting tool like the one I passed around, that's got a lot of play. If I use this really shallow angle on there, there's a chance that it could be too much, that it can slide out. And you could do the math on it. If your parting tool's, an 1/8 of an inch thick, then, then that's all the way around. It's basically going to give you, twice that in terms of play. So you could do the math on that, but I would say just common sense, eyeballing it, you can know, how shallow or not shallow you can go. One other thing to keep in mind for this, for these beads, I don't think that I could really get into a shallow angle because my beads here, prevent it. This is kind of as far as I could get, especially if I wanted them hidden. I mean, I could do the top of my bead by making it shallower, but what I have around it kind of prevents that. So that's where the planning ahead comes into account. Know what you have to work with, you can kind of plan for it. And then you can also do a lot shallower of an angle too, but now you're going to have a thinner, less rigid, more easily able to break piece.
When you do the one that you've been showing, do you have tailstock support so that you don't have any vibration in that?
I did. This picture up to the top, that is so I've got it chucked up, and then I've got the tailstock in. I have not hollowed it yet. And then you can also see that's my thin parting tool right there. So I do have support, and depending on how sharp your parting tool is, you may be using a decent amount of force. I felt like with this, I was using some force. If I sharpened it better, I mean, it was just a quick grind job, so it wasn't necessarily perfect. But I was using some force, and if you want to go quicker, the longer that you keep that tool in there, the more friction you have. So it's kind of a balancing act of, do you jab in there real aggressive? Do you go in there a little slower and create more friction? There's things that you can play with, which I have not played with too much yet. I did one, and I'm like, it works, we're bringing it in. So, yeah. Other questions? That's a good question. Okay, so next variation that we've got on the captured ring, this is the captured goblet here, and pictures here on the left are pretty simple. We're making a cylinder, I'm drawing out what I imagine it's going to be, and then I carve out the outside of my goblet. From there, though, I'm going to start using, and you can use your thin parting tool again, which is what I used here, to go into this side of the goblet, the underneath of it. and go as deep as you can. And then from there, I started hollowing it. So I've got an easy wood hollower here. And how many of you guys have hollowed a bowl, but you've kept like a spigot of wood in the middle just so you can keep your tailstock in there? That's functionally what I did here. But I intended to use that piece of wood at the end. But otherwise, all of you guys have seen that when you make a bowl, and now it's just using it, like knowing ahead, planning ahead to use it. And so I just tried to make that spigot of wood that's remaining the same thickness as it is underneath. And then I used my parting tool as far as I could, and both parting tools, and was getting creative. And then I did end up using carving chisels and actually even just razor blade to do some by hand, because my thickness at the bottom of this is actually pretty thick. I'm okay with that because it keeps it bottom heavy and because it was the first one I did. But to make your life easier, if you make that as thin as you can, you don't have much to remove. But because I had a lot to remove, and I would have had some pretty good leverage there, and I was like, I'll go back to some hand tools to cut it free at the last bit, just because I was getting kind of thin, didn't want to break it, it was looking good, so I was okay with that compromise. And then again, once you actually get it free, which is this top right, you can see it wobbling there. Now you've got more space. You can tape it down to the bottom so you can get to the top. You tape it to the top so you can get to the bottom. You sand it. You make this goblet stem in the middle really thin so everyone thinks that you're really good and talented, but you do that afterwards and you're good. So that's kind of the quick run through of the captured goblet. Questions on this?
Now you tapered it so that when it drops down it's tight and not flopping around.
Yes, and that was completely intentional. It was, I did have a taper and I did make this a little bit better so it matches. I think if I were to do this again, I would, like there is a visible seam here. I think that if I had one more kind of matching bead on this that's a little smaller, then it fits there, and now it's all one thing that like is completely consistent. Because right now there's kind of a jarring little angle that doesn't match. I'm not that worried about it, but if I'm going for like perfection and so that you don't notice that it's anything funky, you could add that and keep in mind your tapers and your shapes that you're matching. So, yep. Other questions here? Okay, so there's that one. So some more things to consider with this kind of stuff, especially with the captive rings, wood warps. Absolutely. So if you're doing a captive ring, so we can think of this, the plate here, you could do a bowl and have the rim at the top. Same with it, like this one. This is a bowl, but it's just straight up and down. You can do an entire rim at the top of a big wide bowl and just go in 45-45 and cut a ring. One problem with that is even if you've got a really big piece of wood that's as dry as you can make it, if you turn it, they're still going to have some warp. So if you go with a really fine parting tool, you don't have a lot of play in there, it may not be as free moving as you want. But in that case, you can use your other parting tool so that you've got enough give in there that it can still spin. So wood warps, just know that that's going to happen. You could do this intentionally, where if you're doing a captive ring, you can do it out of really green wood, so that way it warps funky. You can use it to your advantage. Just knowing what you can and can't do is helpful. Yeah, so more warp is good or bad depending on what you're doing. Doing these, you can see the char marks. You can see on the underside of this that there's a crack as well. That creates a lot of friction, that creates a lot of heat, that can crack, that can warp as well. So just be aware of that. Plan for taking your time on it. Go in deep enough, let it spin for a while, cool down, go back at it, that kind of thing. And then lastly, there are some specific tools for doing captured rings and ball and cages. I have found more for the captured rings. They're just like beading tools, but a lot of them only have one hook for beading. But you can also use a beading tool and just go around around at the top and around at the bottom, and it would work too. And I'm pretty sure that I've seen a tool for doing like the inside of ball and cages, those ball in a ball, and I think that it has this kind of shape, but I was Googling for it, I couldn't find one. But you could make one as long as you've just got like a little chunk that sticks out to the side, that will get in underneath of your wall going down to carve out the sides. So that shouldn't be that hard to make a tool.
Yeah. I don't know if they're still in the catalogs or not, but there's a fellow by the name of David Springett
Okay.
who made a whole set doing what he referred to. You were talking about the ball in the cage and ball in ball and ball.
Yeah.
And his set was specifically to do what he called Chinese balls.
Chinese balls.
And there are 3 tools that get down in there and help you to get like the top and bottom,
Yeah.
or sides and side cutaway essentially at the same time.
Okay, so if you're looking, there are tools for that. And yeah, I think I've seen those kinds of things out of jade, and I mean, like, that's awesome to think about. So you can do it on a lathe without having to use the fine, hand tools, knives, and whittling. You can do it on the lathe. So speaking of carving a chain here, I'll go briefly into carving a chain now that we've kind of done a lot of stuff on the lathe. Again, this is just you remove everything that's not a chain. But the first thing, draw it out. So this, all of these pieces or pictures here are for doing this one. Drew it out. This one had a lot that I had to fit in there, and so it was a lot of kind of planning ahead and finagling so that I could fit all of the chain links inside of these. So I had all of these kind of angled crossways so that they could fit. And then once I had what's going to remain, I used the drill press to get rid of as much material as I could. So I didn't require any fine carving there. That's a drill press, and you can hog out a lot of material. And then once you know what your depth is on the middle, you can also use the drill press to basically mill out all of that. So you can see that all I've got left in the middle is just those thin pieces, and chisels work really well for that. You can take your chisel, you do some stop cuts on the side, or the side of that link there. You come in from the side, and a chisel goes straight across, and that can remove a lot of material quickly. We still haven't gotten into fine carving tools. And then after that, I did it by hand with hand carving tools, but using a Dremel would probably be quicker and easier, but it was more just, it's relaxing, you can do inside using hand tools. But over here, this chain here is the chain that I've got on this U-balloon. I think there's like 30 or 35 links in here. That's going to be a pain to do by hand. So for this one, you can take you've got your just block of wood, and then can you guys imagine the cross section of this chain is a plus sign? You've got links that are going up and down. You've got links side to side. So use your table saw, use your router, whatever, to hog off the corners of it. So you've got a plus sign. Then I use the bandsaw to cut, the curves, because with this link here, everything in the middle isn't needed. So I can use the bandsaw to cut away this material, and then turn it and use the bandsaw to cut that material. And then you use the drill press to remove all of that material. The one tricky part is that all of that's on the up and down or side to side axis, and you can get to it with those kinds of tools. The problem is kind of that diagonal axis, if you kind of know what I'm saying, in between the chain links. That's where it's going to be trickiest. You could use a drill press and a thin drill bit and then just be careful and be good at holding it at an angle. That would work, but also using a Dremel, using some hand tools, that would be the time that I would use that. But otherwise, I'm going to try and make things as easy on myself as I can, remove as much material as I can with the bigger tools. So there's the basics of carving a chain. Are there questions there with that? Okay, we're getting close to being done here. But now we're going to add chain handles to a turned piece. So now we've got this. We've turned the bowl on the lathe, and then I turned the entire inside, and then I turned the bottom as well. But this is where that plan ahead comes in mind, because you know that you're going to have these parts here that you can't turn away, and you also know that you're going to have the chain link sticking out. So you have to plan ahead for those and turn those onto it. Here is where grain direction becomes a little important, because I've got my grain direction running this way the whole time. You could just as easily have done it kind of like this piece, where the handles are sticking up and down. I could have turned it like this, but I thought that I would have too much short grain going across this, that it wouldn't actually be as sturdy. You still do have short grain on this because it is kind of an oval shape, but I think that you have less of it. But you can see on these shapes here, this is what it looked like off of the lathe initially turning it. You're going to plan and know that you're going to have a big loop there, and you're going to have a longer rectangle sticking out there. But the more material you can remove on the lathe, the easier. I probably left it pretty thick. Again, this was a proof of concept, and I'm a lot better at removing material than I am adding material, so I played safe rather than sorry. But once you kind of know what you're looking at, or you've done one or two of them, you can remove a lot more material like on the lathe. And the more material you remove, the quicker, the better. Then I'm using the drill press there to remove it. I don't remember what I used for carving down and flattening those out, but it doesn't matter. Whatever tool that you're most comfortable with and that you have access to, removing material. And then, yeah, we know what a chain link looks like, and so we're just removing the material for it. Drill press, electric drill to get through there, Dremel to curve, to smooth it out, that kind of thing, whatever. And then I remounted it back up to kind of smooth out the bottom to finish it up so it looked nice. Just have a flat piece of wood that I've got mounted, and then I just jammed it up against and then used some tape, because you do have pretty good centrifugal force on these handles, and so I didn't want to break them out, so I just taped them down. And then last, I'll kind of say some final tips on this stuff. I would say that bigger is better on a lot of these, because the more space that you have, the easier it is to get a tool in there to work with. These are some smaller chain links, or let's say this piece here, where there's not a whole lot of clearance, so that means you have to use hand tools to get inside and underneath. The bigger, the more space that you have to get in there, the easier it is to remove that material. Though, the smaller piece you have, the less material you have to get rid of. So, it kind of balances to what you want and what you're good at and what you want to do. Stop cuts are really important for anything that you're carving, and that's either on the lathe or this. You could also kind of think that, we've got grain going this way, and it would be real easy for that to just want to break straight through. So using some stop cuts in here so that your grain doesn't snap off all the way into a place where you don't want it to snap off is helpful and important. Definitely plan ahead. You can always remove more material, harder to add it. And then last, I think this is maybe the most important thing when you're doing this kind of stuff, is that it's easiest to carve when things are attached, but it's harder to get in there. So you can imagine, what would be a good example of this? Well, this would be a good one. It's a lot easier to remove the material around these chain links when they're all attached in one piece. Think of when you're carving a piece of wood with a mallet and chisel, and you put it in a vise block. There's a reason why you put it in a vise, because that's how you can remove material, that kind of thing. But if you're wanting to get to the inside of this, that's a lot easier to do when it's free moving and you can pull that piece out here, right? So it's easier to get to some of those spaces when it's disattached. But when you're trying to do that and you're trying to apply force and it's spinning on you the whole time, that's a pain in the ass. So just kind of try and do as much as you can while it's attached, and then do the hard parts that you can't get to at the end. And that's going to come with practice. you're gonna do something and you're like, I just wanna get it free so I can, feel like I've got some progress, so I can get to it, and then it's free, and then you're gonna be like, damn, I wish this was like still, solid that I could carve with. But the more you do, the better you'll get at that kind of stuff. So I would highly recommend trying some of these. A lot of, like, especially with these captive rims, that's not hard. That's just a 45-degree, plunge cut with a parting tool and a 45-degree plunge cut there. And now you've got something, spinning. And that's not something that you usually see and are used to on the lathe. I mean, same here, you can make, I know some of you guys make little, figurines and stuff. You can make wheels all one piece now. Like, I don't know what it is that you guys are going to make and you're going to see out of this that would be cool and clever, but I'm sure there are things. So I highly recommend giving it a try and playing around with it, because it's kind of neat. So that's all I've got here. Are there final questions, more questions about any of this stuff?
What's your favorite wood to do some of that with?
Well, so for carving, basswood is probably the best because it's a soft wood and you can hand carve it. Where's he at? John was talking about that pumpkin that he did was out of basswood, and because it is a soft wood, you get a lot of tear out. So if you're doing something that involves turning and carving, I don't think I would recommend basswood unless you're going to do something really, really intricate and you're okay just like sanding the turn part of it a lot. Otherwise, I don't know if I really have a favorite, because at that point when you're carving it, it's all just wood and you don't really need a whole lot of the structure to it, or the tear out, the porosity, any of that. At that point, it's kind of wood. When I'm doing a lot of the carvings, I like a plainer wood so that the focus is more on the carving and the intricacy. But when doing, turning, then it's like, okay, let's look at the wood itself. So I can't say, this is a start of another project I was thinking about trying to finish up, and you can kind of see a little bit of the process. This was going to be chain links in a circle, rather than starting with a plus sign in a straight line like this. You can think of the plus sign in a circular axis. We've got up there and we've got out here. And so you can have your chain links that are going up, that are going this way, and then your chain links going around this way. You can see how I would go about doing that. You can see that I used a drill press for a lot of the pieces, because I was trying to show how you can do it without having to worry about, fingers and stuff that don't work as well. But I would say don't use spalted wood, because this is real punky and soft, and I don't think that the chain links are going to hold up super good. But this had, thickness that I wanted, and it was laying around, so I used it. So I can tell you what wood not to use. But otherwise, whatever wood that you got in your shop, use that.
Now there, probably having a little bit green wood would be an advantage.
Yes, exactly. Green wood would be an advantage there because it's easier, it's quicker, and because you're probably going to be carving, like ideally I would do this bigger. Like when I said here, bigger is better, this would be a good case in point, because you can see how thin that arm of that link is, and the arm on the inside, or like the upper piece, has to be even smaller. That's going to be a really thin, really fragile, set of chain links. If I expanded this out to here, I got way more space that I can play around with. And if you're making big chain links, who cares about the warp? It's not going to warp that much. You're carving it anyway, so if it warps and wobbles a little bit, you carve it down again. So I agree. Green wood would be nice for doing that kind of thing. Anything else? Okay, well that's what I got, so thanks for listening. I appreciate it.
Notice he had a Rikon lathe that he did that mold. I'm expecting great things.
Good job, Chris.
Thank you. Well, and my old lathe, so, what's your name again? Tom. So my old lathe was a Rikon Mini as well, and that's what I did this on. Really? So, I mean, mine had 10-inch diameter.
Yeah.
So,
There's two more
But you
carriers
can
over
do,
there, Corey.
you know, decent stuff on them.
Ain't that table?
So,
Amazing.
Yeah, thanks, very good.
no, thanks for coming and being here, and, it's a fun hobby to have.
I have a question. Can you repeat the last half hour?
Yeah, I believe it's on our YouTube. If you go to our YouTube channel, you can watch it and you can rewind as much as you want.